When you speak, your voice is your most important tool. Fortunately, you can learn to use your voice like playing a musical instrument to increase your power and persuasiveness in any conversation or speech that you give. Tip number 1 is to slow down. When you speak more slowly, your voice has more power and authority. Your listeners have an opportunity to absorb and reflect on what you're saying. You exude confidence. You lend your words greater importance. All powerful people speak slowly, enunciate clearly, and express themselves with confidence. Loud, confident speaking is powerful and moving. When you speak too rapidly, your pitch increases, often to something squeaky and childlike. Thus, the impact of your words and your influence on the audience both decrease, because listeners downgrade the importance or value of what the speaker is saying when the speaker speaks too quickly. Number 2, build vocal power. The human voice is like a muscle. It can be made stronger with exercise and use. Many people with weak voices have become powerful, confident speakers by building their voices over time with exercise. Here's an example. Memorize a piece of poetry and recite it regularly as you drive or walk around. Imagine that you're making a dramatic presentation on a stage in front of a large number of people. Put emotion and strength and emphasis and energy into the words. Go slowly. Change the emphasis on each word in the line of poetry and then thereby change the meaning of the line. Tip number 3 is record and listen to your voice. As you develop your ability to speak powerfully, record yourself reading poetry or parts of plays. Replay these recordings over and over, looking for ways to improve your pronunciation, your delivery, and your pacing. Tip number 4, record phone conversations. You can increase your level of vocal mastery by recording your side of conversations and listening to them afterwards. Every time you record and play back your own voice, you will hear different ways that you could improve your delivery and articulation next time. Tip number 5, focus on pauses. The drama and power of a speech is contained in the silences that you create as you move from point to point. There are 4 kinds of pauses you can use to put more power into your presentations. They are the sense pause, the dramatic pause, the emphatic pause, and the sentence completion pause. Tip number 6, eat and drink well. Energy is essential for good speaking and voice projection. Before a short talk, eat lightly. This ensures that you are bright and alert when you start speaking and that your brain is functioning at its best. Before a long talk, it's essential to eat well. A solid, high-protein breakfast or lunch will give you energy to burn for 4 to 5 hours. Protein is brain food, and you need it to think and speak effectively. Your voice will remain strong and your mind will stay clear. To ensure the best possible voice, only drink room temperature water prior to and during your speech. Cold water can chill your vocal cords and decrease the amount of warmth in your voice. When you have a sore throat, it can be difficult to speak clearly and project that voice. If this occurs, drink hot water with lots of honey and lemon juice. This miraculous combination has saved me on several occasions. Preparation is essential to your ability to deliver a powerful speech.
The fact that you know what you want to say and know your subject matter well is fine. But don't make the mistake of thinking the audience knows what you want to say or is as familiar with the subject or even knows about the subject. Make sure that your sentences are complete, that you have the who, why, what, when, and how in your talk. Don't assume anything. I have a little sign in my desk drawer sent to me by a good friend which reads, "Assumption is the mother of all foul-ups." Assume nothing. Don't say he or she when you can use the name. Never use that mongrel expression, "you know," or "it's first cousin, you know what I mean." No, they don't know what you mean. Our job is to tell them what we mean in clear, easily understood, and very good English. Don't, like my good friend, say something ended in disaster. Tell us what kind of disaster. When we're standing up there in front of all those people, we're in the role of the reporter. We want to say what we want to say in an interesting, colorful, and effective manner. There's no room for ambiguity. There's some very good advice about writing a novel. It goes, be clear, be clear, be clear, but not too clear. Now that's fine for a novel, but it won't work for making speeches. There it has to read, be clear, be clear, be clear, be clear. That's what speaking is all about, to transfer the picture from your mind, the whole picture with all the parts attached, into the minds of your listeners. There's something that Kipling wrote about the savage who stood up in ancient times in the firelight one night and told his companions about the hunt that day. And as he spoke and gesticulated and walked up and down, the hunt came alive for them again, and finally they rose up and killed him, for there was magic in his words, and they were afraid. I don't have that exactly right, but that was the gist of it. Yes, there is magic in words, properly strung together and effectively, movingly delivered. But there's nothing more exasperating to an audience than the speaker who leaves too much to the imagination or makes the assumption the audience has the picture as clearly as he or she does. Then the audience wants to rise up and kill him. Former President Richard Nixon was famous for his comment, "I want to be very clear about this." Now, when we hear a politician say that, we get our defenses up. It's like the merchant who says he's got a store-wide sale on at cost. Whose cost? Our cost, not his. You don't have to tell the audience you want to be very clear. Just be clear. Make sure your talk has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that there are no lingering doubts in anyone's mind as to what you had to say, what your message was. Now, this includes enunciating clearly and speaking at the right rate of speed, not too slow by all means, but not too fast either. We should speak at a good rate. The minds of our listeners can move a whole lot faster than we can talk, and as long as our words and meaning can be clearly understood, we can sail along at a good fast clip. It helps hold the audience's attention. There's no time for their minds to wander, and the speech is more interesting delivered at a good rate. Not rapid fire, but at a good rate of speed, about the rate of speed at which I am speaking here. The ends of words should be spoken as clearly as their beginnings, and suddenly dropping your voice for dramatic effect might leave a large portion of your audience in the dark as to what you said. When you speak more softly, you must move closer to the microphone. If you're going to yell about something, move back so that your voice isn't distorted and your audience's ears offended. In speaking at a good rate of speed, make certain that you're not running your words together too much. You know, when we listen to someone who speaks clearly and interestingly, we're not even aware of the words he's using at all, just as you're not really aware of the words I'm using here. We listen for ideas. We pluck ideas from the stream of narrative as we catch fish from a flowing river. The words make the ideas clear. They flavor our speech like good seasoning flavors a meal. They convince, they sell our ideas. So the words that we use are very important. But they're used in such a way that just the ideas come through, just as the hundreds of brushstrokes of a fine painting are invisible in themselves, yet together they form the message the artist wants to convey. When our speech is in preparation, it's a good time to ask ourselves, will this talk make my ideas as clear to the audience as they are to me? That's why it's said that the good speaker tells his audience what he's going to say, then he says it, and then he tells them what he said. When he's through, the message has been transferred from his mind to the minds of his audience. And that's about what this business of speaking before a group is all about. When we're talking to subordinates at work or to our kids, we can use the excellent device of good communications and ask them to tell us in their own words what we've told them we want them to do. It's also a good idea with waitresses. Quite often as we listen to what they heard us say, we find it's different from what we meant to say. Somehow we fail to get the message across as we wanted to. Speaking before an audience does not give us that luxury. We get feedback to be sure. If we're sensitive, we know at every stage of our talk how the audience is reacting. But we can't ask them to tell us what we said. We've got to do it right the first time. Don't assume anything. Assumption is the mother of all foul-ups. Tell them, and tell them clearly.
And now we're going to talk about probably the major skill in your life to learn because it affects everything else you do, called communication. So let's get started. 4 steps to achieving good communications. This is some very simple stuff. Anybody can master it. Here's step number 1. Have something good to say. This simply means, preparation is the key to good communication. if you're in business that requires communication, it's all the more important. But it's called a lifetime of preparation, getting ready. You know, nothing comes out until something goes in. We call it in computer language. You got to put stuff in, and now you can get it out. So the key is consistently to make deliberate, consistent effort to keep putting into your head, putting into your heart and soul information from your experiences. We talk about capturing it, absorbing it yesterday, so that now you've got something, right? You cannot speak that which you do not know. You can't relate what you don't have. You can't give out what hasn't come in. Now, to achieve preparation, I got 4 good words. Here they are. First, interest. See if you can't just sharpen your curiosity and your interest in life and people. Those are the big subjects, life and people. Then here's number 2, fascination. To go from interest to fascination. Interested people want to know, does it work? Fascinated people want to know, how does it work, right? What goes on below the surface? I can see that it works, but what makes it work? Here's the next word, and this is an important word, preparing for good communication. Sensitivity. Trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Trying to feel what they feel. Trying to hurt like they hurt. Sympathy, compassion. So we've got interest, we've got fascination, we've got sensitivity. Here's one more word, knowledge. You just have to know. Working knowledge from keeping a journal. Being serious about your ongoing education. Filling up your mental and spiritual and emotional bank so that it becomes like an unending reservoir to draw from. Okay? That begins to help you prepare. Now, here's the next step to good communication, and that's to say it well. Now that you've got something good to say, now you want to present it well, so that it's acceptable, so that it's listenable. And saying it well is a whole list of things. Let's go through those. Here's number 1, sincerity. Sincerity is not a test of truth. Only truth is the test of truth, but it is important to be sincere. And if somebody sincerely wants to listen, somebody sincerely wants to speak, you can get a lot accomplished. Next, to say it well, is repetition. Doing it over and over until you get better and better. Getting better this week than you were last week. Getting better this year than you were last year. Life expects us to make measurable progress in reasonable time. Here's another one that's important. Brevity. You know, the better you get at communication, the more you can say things in fewer words. You get to where you can compact. Once you're really good at your own language, you can compact an idea into a shorter period of time. Here's another good one, style. It's important to sort of fully develop your own style. Now, be a student of style. The way someone might use hand gestures, the way someone uses the expressions in their face, the way somebody emphasizes a point, style. You've got to develop what is your style, what fits your size and your voice and your self and your temperament. Here's another key to saying it well, and that's your vocabulary. You've got to just work on that all of your life. Vocabulary is the tools by which we reach someone with our language. Vocabulary does 2 things. 1, helps us to express. Number 2, vocabulary helps us to understand, to comprehend. Okay, we've covered have something good to say, do the research, have something valuable to translate, then say it well. We've covered that. Now here's the 3rd step to good communication, and that's to read your audience, whether it's an audience of a child or an audience of 1,000. You've got to read your audience to see how it's coming across. Now you're expressing, now you're communicating. How are you doing? Are they getting it? Does it make sense? Should you pour it on? Should you back off a little bit? Should you be a little stronger? Should you be a little easier? Now, to pick up the signals, here's 3 ways. 1, you pick up what you see. Sometimes it's fairly obvious, how it's going, right? Somebody's gestures, somebody's body language, right, tells you, right, that you got to press a little hard, you got to push, you got to be emphatic, right? Go by what you see. Now here's a couple of more. Next, read what you hear. Feedback. Mama said a good speaker's a good listener. You speak well by listening well. And what you hear a person say or the child say is signals, gives you signals about whether or not to proceed, maybe to change the subject, maybe to back away. So we read what we see, we read what we hear. Now here's the tricky one, to read what you feel. Here's where the women seem to be already schooled in picking up emotional signals. Women seem to have this, the females seem to have this antenna that picks up all this emotional stuff. But men can train themselves to pick up these emotional signals so you don't talk past what your emotional signal said. Hey, this is not the time. And if you don't pick up those emotional signals, you can say some damaging things. If you don't pick up the heart stuff, the emotional stuff. So, men have to work at it a little harder than the women. They seem to have it built in. Women have this instinct. Here's the fourth step to good communication. Intensity. The spirit and power and emotion with which you translate your communication. Intensity gives power to vocabulary. Words are just words, but here's what's powerful. Words loaded with emotion. See, that's what's powerful. And your words can become so powerful, it can strike somebody's consciousness and they say, oh, wow, now I know what I did wrong. Now I understand the difficulty. Now I can see. And words can become that powerful that they strike the heart, they strike the mind, they strike the consciousness so that somebody can see. So since words are that powerful mixed with emotion, here's what's important. Next line, learn to measure your emotions. Because if you don't do that, you can do more damage than good. Words not only give life, words kill. With words, you can kill someone's incentive. You can kill someone's dignity. You can either give life or take life by the words you use. So you got to be very careful now with this emotional power. You got to use it very wisely. We're talking now about being effective. Here's the key, enough emotion. Now the men have to work on enough. And probably the female side has to work on a bit of restraint. The men, a bit more, enough, and the women, not too much. And we all have to measure that, whether it's in our business, whether it's in sales, or whether it's speaking to a child. Enough, but not too much.
If you're going to speak about something, you need to know a lot about it. You need to know 3 or 4 times as much as you're going to speak about at minimum. So first of all, you have to do your background research. You have to have multiple stories at hand that you can use to illustrate your point. And you have to have a point. You have to organize what you're talking about around a problem. So before I go on stage to speak on my tour, I always sit for half an hour, some of which involves usually about 5 minutes of anxiety. And I think, okay, there's a problem I'm trying to address tonight, a central problem or a theme. What is it? It might be courage, it might be responsibility, it might be meaning. And that serves as an organizing principle. So that would be the point. And then basically I organize, say, a dozen stories around that, and I can kind of arrange them in it as a journey, and it's a journey that circles the main point. And so I'm trying to explore it, to say what I think about courage, let's say, but to take what I'm thinking farther than I've taken it already. And so then I can plot out, little 5-minute stories that I have that are associated with courage, and then I can talk to the audience. And I would say, talk about what you know. Use your personal experience, because that's something that you're actually a master of. You can bring in other material, but it has to be tied to the real world through your own experience. Otherwise, it's not real. It's also very good to speak directly to the audience, to the individuals in the audience, because I'm always looking at a single person, one after another, and focusing on them and talking to them just like you'd have a conversation with someone. And that way I can see if they're following along. And I'm always listening to the audience. What I really like to hear from the audience is no noise at all, silence. Because if the audience, especially, if it's a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand people, if the audience is dead silent, then I know that I'm on the right track. And the other thing I would say is you're telling stories. So every fact that you relate or every set of facts has to be tied to a story. There has to be a meaningful output, which is something like, why is it important to your life that you know this fact? How is it related to how you're going to conduct yourself moving forward, or how you're going to see the world? So, because that's kind of the essence of meaning. How does this fact change the way you perceive the world or act in the world? That's the meaning of the fact. And facts without meaning are dull. So you need to know that. You need to tell the truth. That's for sure. And I mean, for me, my talks are they're an attempt to explore a set of ideas in the most truthful way that I can manage. And that's also an adventure, because letting yourself speak freely about a topic, you don't always know where it's going to go. And so, but that also hooks in the audience, because they're along for the ride, right? And there's a risk. The risk is you might forget where you are, you might lose the thread, you might say something you regret, you might get confused. And the talk should be a process of exploration, like a journey that you're taking the audience along on. It's the same when you're reading a novel. Like a great novel isn't exactly plotted out from beginning to end to begin with. The author is taking himself or herself and you on an intellectual adventure through the character development, and the characters have to be allowed to live and to express themselves, and the novel needs to unfold. It's like a colloquy between the conscious mind and the unconscious source of inspiration. And the novel is actually a journey through a characterological landscape, and the author shouldn't know where he or she's going to end up at the beginning. Same with an artist and who's writing a song or a piece of music or a piece of visual art. There has to be play and exploration along the way. And so you also don't want to deliver an over-prepared talk, in my estimation, or at least that's not how I do it. You want to have a theme, you want to have a body of knowledge from which you can draw on, and then you want to be actively exploring the idea in front of the audience. And that's very gripping for everyone, including you. And you should learn something from the talk. It's an opportunity to think on your feet. And anyways, that's my style of lecturing. It's a trapeze act without a safety net, I would say. And that's part of what makes it gripping, is that there's a high probability of failure. And I would say with any performance that's going to be gripping, that on the edge of the seat gripping, there has to be a high probability of failure. And that's why I don't speak with notes. If you speak with notes, which you might have to if you're a beginning speaker, then you cannot fail, because you can always read the notes. And so there's a net. You'll fall in the net, but you won't die. But you'll never do anything spectacular. So that's the thing, is if you're going to do something spectacular, you have to take the risk. And if you're going to take the risk, you have to think on your feet. And then you also have to have something to think about. You have to have been working on this material. I've been working on the stuff I talk about for 30 years, for tens of thousands of hours. And so I have that reservoir of knowledge, I suppose. And, whenever I read something new, I'm slotting it into the knowledge structure that I use to generate my talks. And I'm reading all the time. And lots of the things I read, I forget. They're not relevant to my central mission, whatever that happens to be. It looks something like the delineation of the relationship between responsibility and meaning, and maybe responsibility, meaning, and perception. It's something like that. And so I have a central concern, or deeper than that in some sense. My central concern was how to ensure personally that if I was tempted in a situation like the situations that arose in the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, that I wouldn't fall prey to those totalitarian systems and act in the reprehensible manner that so many people acted in. That's really been a driving concern of mine. And that bleeds over into the relationship between meaning and responsibility and perception. So there's a core set of problems that I'm working on, and every talk is an attempt to further develop those. So you also have to have a problem, You think, well, you don't want to have a problem. It's like, yeah, you do. You've got problems anyways. If you're alive, you've got problems. Pick one of them. It can be your problem, and that can be the problem you try to address, whatever that happens to be. And then you have something to talk about. How am I going to address this problem? How can this problem be addressed? So you need to have a problem too if you're going to talk, just like you need to have a problem if you're going to write, because the writing is an attempt to solve the problem, and so is the talking. If you're not trying to solve a problem, what the hell are you doing talking? Why should anyone care? It's got to be a real problem too, like a nail biter of a problem, a dragon of a problem. And if it's a problem that everyone else shares, so much the better.